Hi, I'm Effie, and every December I stop reading books that I've not read before at some point in the month, and I go on to just purely rereading. I absolutely love doing this because as much as I'm quite happy to reread throughout the whole of the year, I really appreciate that by doing this, I am giving myself allocated time just for rereads, and I absolutely love it. So in this video, I'm going to be running down some books that I am excited to reread. Whether I get to them this December, I don't know, but these are books that I just want to explore all over again. At the top of the list, we have A Little Life by Hanya Yanagihara. I initially consumed this story as an audiobook, and the audiobook is really good. Although maybe don't recommend listening to it whilst at work if you don't want to be crying at work for 2.5 hours straight. But you know, it is what it is. Like, I'm quite an easy crier, so I'm not ashamed at audiobooks making me cry at work back when I was able to work. That's a whole other story. But I enjoyed this book so much that I immediately went out and bought myself a physical copy with the intention of being able to annotate it on reread. Obviously that is a rather large commitment because it is chunky, it's like that thick, but there's just, I think it would be so worthwhile. Although saying that, can you imagine if I reread it and actually didn't love it on reread? It's a hard going book, but it really touched something in my soul when I read it. Monstrous by Nicole and Rubino basically says, what if instead of a magical school being for the heroes of the story, it is for the villains? So in this book we are following Rhiannon, who on her 18th birthday finds out that she is descended from a monster of old. She grows fangs and her nails grow into talons, and she immediately starts getting hungry for human flesh. So she gets invited to join Alistair University, where she will learn about her monstrous nature and learn to harness it. There are mysteries abound. In fact, this book is a murder mystery, I think. Someone's going around campus killing people, and there's all sorts of secrets to unlock. But there is also a romance with her roommate's brother. The reason that I particularly want to reread this is I recently read Venomous, the sequel to Monstrous, and I feel like I had such a different experience with the two books. Like, that's not to say I didn't enjoy Monstrous, I very much did, but Venomous was just on a whole other level. So I want to go back to Monstrous and see if it was just that the way I was feeling, the mood, whatever, when I first read it is why I experienced it differently. Cruel is the Light by Sophie Clark actually doesn't come out until next year, but I feel like the first time I read it, I was going through so quickly, absolutely devouring it, that I already want to reread. Like, it's a really good story anyway. It has themes of good and evil, and who are truly good and who are truly evil. It is a reimagined version of the Vatican in Rome, but it's a whole other religion. There is literally the god is staked in the center of their Holy of Holies, and the exorcists who work for Rome have kind of deals with demons in order to give themselves more power. So you are following this exorcist who has been given the moniker of the Butcher of Rome, and you are also following an orphan whose paths cross with this exorcist, and they basically have to fake being engaged. It's a really fun story with lots of secrets to uncover, and as I say, there's this running question of who is the true evil in this story. Iron Widow by Xiran Zhao. I'm not going to go into what Iron Widow's about because it's fantastic, and also Zhao has done really well for themselves with Iron Widows. So I think it's one of those books that if you're in the bookish community, you're already very well aware of it. And the reason that I want to reread it is simply because I want to remember everything ahead of Heavenly Tyrant coming out later this month. However, I won't be able to read it until the new year because 1, I'll be deep into rereads at that point, and 2, I ordered the Illumicrate copy, which means I won't actually have a copy until the new year. Circe by Madeline Miller. I want to reread this because I read A Song of Achilles earlier in the year, absolutely despised it, and thought that my feelings about Circe were that it was kind of made nothing too special. But then when I looked back on my rating, I actually hadn't rated it particularly low. So I want to go back and see what I actually think of the story, and if it's a case of Song of Achilles was just an exception that was not very good and I actually like Miller's writing. I guess we'll see. A Mirror Mended by Alexis Harrow is a novella where the evil queen is the love interest, and it just takes you on a journey through all the different iterations of the story of Snow White, and it gets really into the weeds and talks about some incredibly dark variations on Snow White, which are obviously a far departure from the very sanitized Disney version that many of us are familiar with. I just remember adoring this novella, so I want to reread it because I want to. When the Moon Hatched by Sarah A. Parker. I had such a weird experience with this book. The first half of it I absolutely despised, and then the second half I absolutely loved. So I want to go back, reread it, and see if I actually end up liking the first half of the book now that I know where the story's going. Once by James Herbert is, I don't know how to describe it. It's like a dark erotic fairy tale, a bit like a fever dream. It's been many years since I read it, and all I remember is that there's a succubus in it and that my copy has some art inside of the succubus doing her thing. So yeah, I want to experience it all over again. The Stars Are Dying by Chloe C. Penaranda is similar to Iron Widow in that the sequel comes out in January, and I want to have reread The Stars Are Dying so that I can remember all the things and dive straight into the sequel. Well, I will actually be starting the sequel this month because I am sort of reading it for a video. Like, I'm not going to read the whole of the sequel, but I need to at least read some of it. So I'm probably going to be like, read a bit of the sequel, reread The Stars Are Dying and then go back and reread the bit of the sequel that I've already read. The Secret Life of Laszlo, Count Dracula by, I think it's Robert Anscombe. In a similar way to Once, I don't remember a terrible amount about this book. I have a vague recollection that our titular character has syphilis or catches syphilis, and that's what makes him a vampire. I just want to experience it and see if it was just a case of one of those weird books that you read as a kid that you like, and then as an adult you're like, what on earth was I thinking? Boyfriend Material by Alexis Hall is pretty much just one that I just want to reread. I mean, I could quite easily reread any of the Alexis Hall books that I've already read, because he is firmly an author for me, and I just think his writing is exceptional. I particularly want to reread Boyfriend Material because I remember the way that the characters communicate feeling very authentic and not at all contrived, and I just want to be back in that world. This Savage Song by V. Schwab. A list from me would be incomplete without mentioning Schwab, it would seem. This Savage Song in particular I want to reread because I'm pretty sure Monsters of Verity is my favourite Schwab series, which is crazy because I have a Shades of Magic tattoo, but there's just something so striking about Monsters of Verity. I think part of it is the way that no one's truly good and no one's truly evil. The monsters are so creative, and we get a good dose of pain as well. Fake Famous by Dana L. Davis. If I'm remembering correctly, the story of this one is that a girl manages to go viral on TikTok, or like a TikTok equivalent, and it turns out that she's a doppelganger for a famous, I think it's singer. So this singer wants to kind of get away from her life, so she says to this girl, fill in for me in, I think it's Hollywood, and live my life please. And I can't remember what she gets out of the bargain, but she does that, and then she ends up falling for the singer's boyfriend, and it just, Dana L. Davis writes so well, and I just decided this is the one I want to reread. Godkiller by Hanya. Somehow I've still not read the sequel to Godkiller, and then the finale comes out next year, and I think it's probably going to break me. I went to a panel that Hanya was on when I was down at Worldcon, and the comments that were made there made me feel like Faithbreaker is going to be a book I'm going to desperately want to read. But first I need to reread Godkiller so that I can re-familiarise myself with the world and the characters. Filthy Rich Vampire by Geneva Lee is the first book in a 4-book series that follows a vampire high society. The first book, Filthy Rich Vampire, involves trials and a fake dating to, oh, we're actually catching real feelings situation. There is a bit of a weird thing going on with the just ideas around virginity, but putting that to one side, I do remember having a really enjoyable time with this book, and I want to reread it so that I can read the rest of the series. And then the final book that I am excited, possibly not the right word to describe this one, maybe just desperate to reread, and that is Witch King by Martha Wells. So I read Witch King for the Goodreads Choice Awards in 2023, and I absolutely zoomed through it, but I don't think that's my issue. I just didn't take anything in from the story, and I think part of it was that it was not engaging to me, so I was just zoning out and just not following. So I would like to read it again to see if it was just I wasn't in the right frame of mind or wasn't in the zone, or if it just isn't a book that's for me. And that's the end of the video. So I guess let me know if you reread books, and if you do, are there any books you are desperately wanting to reread in the near future, or just any time, I guess. But until next time, love you, bye.